I'm very well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm fine. Nice weather here. Best part of the year.
Excellent.
Well, we spoke together 6 years ago. I'm not sure you remember that because you speak with many people, I guess. And that was for an article in Vrij Nederlands. And we spoke about rapid climate change and near-term extinction was very interesting. You were living in Belize that time. I have followed you ever since, and we decided to do a remake of this article according to the newest insights and research. And it seemed a good idea to me to speak to you again, to ask you your opinions about the last 6 years. What has changed in our view on this subject? Has society adapted to the ideas? Because in Europe, at least in the Netherlands, that time 6 years ago, this article which I wrote with essentially your ideas, was seen as much too pessimistic and not realistic. It sold very well, though.
Yes.
But now, these days, the public opinion in the Netherlands moved into this direction, and that's also because we had some freak summers. We had a very, very dry and hot summer this year, and a very freak rainfall in Germany caused big floodings in the Netherlands, which the year before, and constant heat waves. Many times it's hotter in the Netherlands than in Greece, where I live. So it's now much more on the agenda. And generally in the Netherlands, the environment is, I guess, after the war in Ukraine, the most important political question now. But more on the subject of nitrogen pollution. But yes, it's an environmental subject. So my first question would be, what do you see has changed in the last 6 years?
Well, very importantly, people have begun to admit that we are in the midst of abrupt climate change, including the IPCC. The IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate indicated that an overheated ocean was responsible for the irreversibility of climate change. And it only takes one factor to demonstrate that climate change is irreversible. I've identified more than 6 such tipping points, and finally people are starting to catch up. So the peer-reviewed journal
5,000? Did you say 5,000?
I don't understand.
Tipping points?
Oh, no. I've identified more than 6 tipping points. More than 60. Yes, more than 60 tipping points in my very long essay. And it's the IPCC, a very conservative organization. It's Henry G., senior editor for Nature. He wrote a paper November 30th, 2021, published in Scientific American, called Humans Are Doomed to Go Extinct. And in that short essay, he concluded that humans are doomed to go extinct very soon. There's a story in The Guardian from July 20th, 2022, just a few months ago, pointing to Bill McGuire's latest book, Hothouse Earth. And Bill McGuire indicates that there's no chance of avoiding a perilous, all-pervasive climate breakdown. We have passed the point of no return. So when these kinds of things are getting reported in a newspaper that has the kind of readership as The Guardian, and also in scientific publications such as Scientific American, and also reported by the very conservative IPCC. That's what I think is contributing to the increased understanding of the notion of irreversible climate change.
Exactly. That parallels what I see in the Netherlands. The Guardian and Vrij Nederland have the same kind of readership, I think. Not politically. About you, you said you identified more than 60 tipping points. Last September, a report, article was published in Science about tipping points, and they related those to rate of warming. So 2 degrees will trigger that tipping point, 3 degrees will likely with some likelihood. Did you see that article?
No, I don't recall seeing it anyway. If you could send it, if you could send it my way, I can take a look. I suspect that it's just another example of the evidence overwhelming even the most conservative scientific publications.
Yes, it's interesting. It was the article describes at the end. Well, we still could evade triggering these tipping points when we, etc. But yesterday I called number 2 on the list of scientists who wrote the article, and he happens to be Dutch, so that was convenient. Arie Staal is his name. He's quite a young fellow, he's 31, but privately he told me, well, I think it's heading against 3 degrees Celsius this century, which will be catastrophic. So that's interesting, isn't it?
Well,
when you speak those people privately.
Right, and we're already beyond 2 degrees C, according to Andrew Glickson in his October 2020 book, The Event Horizon. He said we already passed 2C. And so it's no surprise. I mean, the precursor organization to the IPCC was called the Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases, and in their October 1985 report, they indicated that tipping points would be exceeded at 1 degree C, and climate writer and speaker David Spratt said, I believe it was, I'm not sure the date, but I'm pretty sure it was 2018, he concluded that 1/2 a degree above the 1750 baseline, 0.5 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline, we already had triggered those self-reinforcing feedback loops, those tipping points. So I think there's increasing knowledge, increasing understanding that we are already past the point of no return, that we triggered those tipping points long ago, and now the only question is how bad is it going to get, and how soon is it going to get that bad?
Yeah, that's my next question, because still I understand all your warnings, but yet it's for many people, it's not for me, but for many among my readership, it's very abstract.
Yes.
To fantasize about how it could become bad within 30 years, essentially within our own lives.
Yes, absolutely. What very few people...
What do you think?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I saw a couple of months ago, I saw a video about your house in the United States and your garden and so on. You seemed quite happy there, and can you imagine by yourself how this will change within 10 or 20 years?
Oh yes,
living there.
Absolutely. I think it will be transformed in a much shorter time than that. And as an ecologist and a conservation biologist, I'm probably better positioned to understand exponential change than most people. And certainly the people I talk to and the people I read about do not have any understanding of exponential change. We are in the midst of exponential change. A vast proportion of the North American continent is in the midst of a heat wave right now, and you know about the heat waves that have passed through Europe in the last several years. It's catastrophic. And does that mean that I, as an individual, am going to be profoundly affected? Does it mean I'm going to die? No, not necessarily. But what it does mean is we are losing habitat for many species, including vertebrates and mammals. And as vertebrate mammals, Homo sapiens should be a little bit concerned about what's going on with respect to loss of habitat. It's the really important point here is the rate of environmental change, and that's something that almost nobody seems to understand. The rate of environmental change is absolutely the most important factor when it comes to whether or not humans can adapt. And already it's been demonstrated in the peer-reviewed literature that mammals cannot keep up with the rate of change, that vertebrates cannot keep up with the rate of change, and we are vertebrate mammals. That should tell us something about our ability to keep up with these very rapid rates of environmental change. How rapid are they? The IPCC, in their October 8th, 2018 report, Global Warming of 1.5 degrees, indicates that even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change. And of course, they quote the peer-reviewed literature dating back to 2015. And in indicating and concluding that the ongoing rate of environmental change is faster than at any previous time in planetary history, as nearly as they can tell.
Yeah.
That is huge, and it's hugely important, and if other species cannot adapt, then that means we cannot adapt. We're already losing grain supplies around the world. The food supplies are drying up, basically, and if we can't grow food, we're in real trouble.
But to play the devil's advocate, you could say, okay, perhaps 1 billion people, 2 billion people, perhaps half of mankind will die because of food shortage. But what prevents people from living comfortably in Canada when the climate is 3 degrees hotter, or in Siberia, or in the Himalayas, where it's always nicely cool?
Right. I get that question a lot, and basically it comes down to two factors, either one of which spells our demise. First of all, there's loss of aerosol masking. The aerosol masking effect is very poorly understood, but at the same time, industrial activity is causing an increase in greenhouse gases and therefore an increase in heating. That same industrial activity also puts aerosols into the atmosphere, and they block incoming sunlight and therefore prevent the planet from cooling. The latest peer-reviewed literature I've seen indicates that as little as a 20% decline in aerosol masking will cause a 1 degree C temperature increase. According to James Hansen, that'll occur in about 5 days. That's a very, very rapid rate of environmental change. So even a significant reduction in industrial activity will trigger a very rapid rate of change. That's hugely important. In addition, when we are reduced to half or a third the current population, which would have been a great idea a couple of 100 years ago, but if we start going that direction now, that means we lose people who are contributing to industrial activity, thus a decline in the aerosol masking effect. And also, I can't imagine we'll be able to maintain the many, many nuclear power facilities without a bunch of people working at them. And when those melt down, that will strip away, the ionizing radiation will strip away stratospheric ozone and cause a very rapid rate of heating and therefore environmental change. So I think it's too late to use depopulation, a reduction in the number of humans, as some sort of strategy ready to provide for a cooler planet. I think it's just too late for that. I mean, I didn't know any better, and that's why I decided not to have children when I was 19 years old, and that was a long time ago. But I knew then that we were headed for a disastrous future.
Yeah, I don't have the children either for about the same reason. Yesterday, Arie Staal told me an interesting point related to this, that in Europe after the Second World War, when production was started up again, industrial production, when the factories were rebuilt in a couple of years, and then they started working, that there was a cooling in the climate because of all the smoke and aerosols which were released.
Yes, of course, and perhaps an even better known case is when France and to a lesser degree surrounding countries switched to nuclear power plants almost overnight. I think this was in 2003, and they made that change very rapidly, and as a consequence, a direct consequence, heat waves came almost immediately and caused the deaths of 200,000 people?
70,000.
70,000 people. Sorry, 70,000 people. And that was in 2003, and I'm certain that was because of the aerosol masking effect, loss of aerosol masking when making the quick switch from coal-fired power plants to nuclear power plants. So there's little bits of information here and there that indicate the importance of aerosol masking regionally. Fortunately, there hasn't been a loss of aerosol masking globally, or I think we would be in a much warmer planet than we are today.
Yeah. But the good thing is that nobody really expects that aerosols will that aerosol emissions will disappear, because nowadays in Holland the coal plants, the coal field power plants are running again. So
yes, absolutely. And most people don't understand how problematic this is. If we keep burning fossil fuels, keep warming the planet, then that will take us to an unlivable future in the not too distant future, as Bill McGuire reports in his latest book, Hothouse Earth, which came out earlier this year.
Yeah.
And yet if we reduce industrial activity, that takes us to an overheated planet even faster. So damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Yes, but yet the Canada argument, say 1 billion people will survive all this doom and gloom, but Canada is a nice place, a lot of forests, better weather than nowadays. Why wouldn't humans just can live there amongst the animals, the insects in the forest? Is there something atmosphere itself which makes it livable?
Because the trees are dying. The rate of environmental change right now is causing the destruction of many, many forests. In fact, in the Netherlands, there's a friend I haven't met yet who was a professor, and she was doing work with remote sensing. So she was an engineer who was doing remote sensing work, and she noticed that these very large areas of forest were dying. They were turning a different color in the remote sensing than they were supposed to be. And so she noticed this, and she started to wonder, this is happening around the world. And she noticed this, and she wonder why that could be. And so she started investigating it, and she discovered right away that it was because of climate change. Already, the rapid rate of environmental change is causing forests to die at a very large scale. And consider the plankton. Plankton provides half of the oxygen we breathe, with the other half coming from the terrestrial planet, mostly in the form of rainforest. And the plankton are dying at a rapid rate. So is the rainforest, for that matter. The bottom line here is that we are all connected, and whatever happens in Ecuador or throughout South America also influences Canada. So just because Canada seems nice right now, and so does Vermont, where I live. It seems nice right now. I know that that's not going to last because the trees can't keep up with the rapid rate of change. Neither can the mycelium, the fungi, the small organisms that provide for the existing habitat of the larger organisms. If the little things die, they're taking us with them.
Yeah, that's a nice one. So you foresee a near future where there is not enough oxygen in the atmosphere to survive as humans? Or is that too extreme?
I think that's way too simplistic. I think we will have abundant oxygen as long as we don't continue to destroy the plankton and the rainforest. But we're already destroying those things. I suspect we will be able to breathe. But what about the other organisms? How are they going to adapt to this rapid rate of environmental change? And as they go, so we go as well. So if we lose a bunch of this small organisms, if we lose a bunch of trees, if we lose the ability to grow grains, for that matter, which is the basis for civilization, every civilization so far, if we lose the ability to grow rice and wheat and corn, then that tells me we've lost the ability to maintain civilization. When we lose civilization because of the reduction in industrial activity, we also lose habitat for Homo sapiens and most other life on Earth. There's a paper published in Scientific Reports. It's an open access journal, part of the renowned Nature series, and it was published on November 13th, 2018. It's written by Strona and Bradshaw, and they indicate a 5 or 6 degree Celsius global average temperature rise will cause the loss of all life on Earth, the extinction of all life on Earth. We're already losing tardigrades. We're already losing a whole bunch of what we would consider small and many people would consider insignificant organisms. But all of those things matter. And we're losing them right now.
The people already, as a species, already met extreme climate change at the end of the ice ages. So people are extremely flexible and adaptable. Also because there are fire apes. I like to call our species Pyropithecus destructor, because we are what the big difference between us and the rest of nature is we use fire. We use it to destroy at the end our own civilization, but we also use it to survive climate change.
Yes.
And to fight to protect our species against wild animals and so on.
We are very clever, and we have managed to survive in places that other organisms cannot. For example, the International Space Station and McMurdo Station in Antarctica. So humans can survive in a very large array of environments. But how do they get the food at the International Space Station? How do they get the food at McMurdo Station in Antarctica? Those items are grown someplace else and then transported to the difficult situations. And I agree that humans have lived in a wide variety of habitats throughout the world, but if we lose habitat for other species, we are also going to lose habitat for our species. We cannot survive the uncontrolled meltdown of nuclear power plants around the world because of the loss of stratospheric ozone. In addition, we cannot survive the ongoing rate of environmental change because we're vertebrate mammals. We've done fine so far, and especially Caucasian people living in the northern hemisphere have done great. People like me, for example. But that doesn't mean it's going to last. Not forever. It's not going to last forever.
Yeah. But yet, Elon Musk is envisaging a city on Mars, a self-sustaining city that is, with at least 1 million people. I don't buy this plan, but anyway, it's a plan for living without all the things we have here. We can't even take care of ourselves. We can't even
managed to preserve a beautiful planet that we were born into, that we evolved into this environment. And you think we're going to go to Mars and create something that we destroyed here and have it last a long time? I would be very surprised if that were to happen. We can't even maintain our own habitat on this pale blue dot, this most beautiful of places. And Elon Musk thinks he's going to go to Mars. I can't think of a better place for him myself.
Yes. Sorry, I'm writing. Musk. Sorry, can't. What do you say? Can't imagine a better place.
So here's a line from the Guardian paper I mentioned earlier. The Guardian paper published on July 20th, 2022. The headline is, "Soon it will be unrecognizable. Total climate meltdown cannot be stopped," says expert. And the crucial point, according to Bill McGuire, the author of Hot House Earth, is that we now have no chance of avoiding a perilous, all-pervasive climate breakdown. We have passed the point of no return and can expect a future in which lethal heat waves and temperatures in excess of 50 degrees C are common. We just don't survive that because of the rapid rate of environmental change. It's coming far faster than almost anybody expected. In fact, in many places of the world, it's already underway. And Bill McGuire was quoted in that article. He says, quote, "I know a lot of people working in climate science who say one thing in public, but a very different thing in private. In confidence, they are all much more scared about the future we face, but they won't admit that in public. I call this climate appeasement, and I believe it only makes things worse." I couldn't agree more. It only makes things worse when you convince people that they're going to be fine, and then suddenly they start losing habitat, and they don't know what that means because almost nobody knows what the word habitat actually means. And so they lose the ability to get food and water, and they're confused. They don't know what's happening. They can't understand why nobody told them this was going to happen. The governments don't seem to be interested in telling the truth. The corporate media, almost everybody in the corporate media falls into that same category. They're not interested in telling people what's actually going on. You know, that IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere and a changing climate was written more than 3 years ago. The paper I mentioned earlier, Global Warming of 1.5 degrees, that was written more than 4 years ago. I never read about it, ever. I never see that in a newspaper, in the corporate media outlets, anywhere. And these are important papers.
A little bit strange because I don't live in the United States, of course, but in Dutch media at least, well, it's a small country, I understand that, but it's commonplace. This week in one of the major newspapers, Greta Thunberg is on the cover. So because she visited the Netherlands, and so there's a lot of attention for it. In fact.
Well, that's great, and
Here.
I'm pleasantly surprised that that's happening there. I can only wish it would happen in the news media outlets I follow.
Yeah. Strange. You also, I saw a video you made yesterday, or you uploaded yesterday, where you say it is becoming dangerous to spread your message.
Yeah.
How is that?
Well, I had a renowned attorney working on my behalf, Gerald Maples, and he slipped on a dock in the Bahamas and died on December 4th, 2020. And there were no witnesses. We don't know how he slipped on a dock. He was accustomed to boating a lot, so he wasn't exactly out of his element when he was in that area and planning to go out on a yacht. And more recently, I had a renowned legal team reach out to me And almost immediately they received blood-soaked messages indicating that they'd better not work with me. And so they're not working with me, obviously, and I can't blame them, because working with me apparently is dangerous. And suddenly they conclude that, based on constructed, non-existent evidence, that I'm a horrible person. And it was a very cleverly orchestrated campaign, and it effectively destroyed my public life. So, it's not about me. I couldn't care less whether I'm out there on speaking tour or not. But the outcome is that the 8 billion people we're going to have on this planet within 2 or 3 weeks, almost none of them will have any idea that we are losing habitat for Homo sapiens, and they don't understand the consequences. They don't even know that we're in the midst of a mass extinction event. Most people won't even admit that, and it's been underway for many years now. So, Edward E.O. Wilson reported it in his 1992 book that we're in the midst of a mass extinction event. So we know this.
Big hero of mine,
Right. Again, I've no doubt that it's more commonly reported in Europe than it is in the United States, because it's the United States of divide and distract. So the whole goal is to keep people confused. But the bottom line is there's a whole bunch of people who do not know what's going on in the world because it is not commonly reported. And I think that's tragic, because people might be willing to live their lives differently and make important changes in their lives if they knew that their time was short.
Yeah, well, I always think everybody will have his own apocalypse, his own Armageddon. The only difference is we will have it together this time. Perhaps that's better.
Right.
Perhaps that's too cynic. Do you know which this smear campaign against you is? That fossil industry, or is it some media outlets? Do you have any idea about that?
Oh, yes. I've been defamed in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, twice in the Guardian. And this is all written at my blog at GuyMcPherson.com. It shouldn't take very much time to find those things, but yes, the media are definitely involved and have been very important in removing me from public service.
Okay, I will dive into that later on. Are you, of course, you know Peter Ward?
Yes.
He about 7 years ago, he published a book about his media theory.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to didn't have time to read it because I just recently found out. I did interview him 6 years ago for the same article, and I think he's an interesting guy. He says essentially that life is its own the worst enemy. So that especially multicellular life, because that's his specialty, the relationship between single cell life and multicellular life. So he says it's quite normal that biological systems kill themselves regularly. Did you dive into this theory, or do you think he sells it as the opposite of the Gaia theory?
Yeah, I understand, but this is the first I've heard about it. I have not read Peter Ward's book about the topic, so I don't know. I'm not in a position to make an informed comment. Usually that wouldn't stop me, but this time I think it should.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, the last time I will play the devil's advocate. Well, nature did survive the impact 60 million years ago when the dinosaurs died out. You can imagine that it was dark for weeks or months after so all plant life did die. Perhaps it was also very hot. And, small animals and insects and mice survived under the dead leaves, I suppose.
In fact,
was a rather extreme situation.
Yes, in fact, that's why we have humans today. is because of that event some 66 million years ago, which cooled the planet and made the mammals rise to the fore and caused the large reptiles and other reptiles to go extinct. But this time, the Great Dying was the worst of the mass extinction events, and we're proceeding at a rate 10 times faster, at least 10 times faster than that event occurred. And it's the rate of environmental change that's so critically important here. If other organisms cannot keep up with the very rapid rate of environmental change, then that suggests to me that humans can't keep up either. And if we lose all other life on Earth, humans are going to have a hard time eating stored food for very long.
Yeah. And also, of course, the difference is that perhaps 66 million years ago, the situation rapidly turned back to the normal, I guess.
Right.
It took perhaps 1 or 2 years.
Yes, certainly within a few generations, whereas during the Great Dying, which is the worst of the mass extinction events, it took much longer than that. And at that time, we lost about 90% of the organisms on the planet, and we're proceeding at a rate much faster this time than occurred then.